Venezuela celebrates the bicentenary of the Carabobo battle, a paramount and historic moment that led to the independence of the South American nation from Spain, its former colonial power. Russia again warned Western powers that trespassing on its territorial waters will have consequences after a British war vessel incursioned into Russian jurisdiction near Crimea this week. The Iranian-developed vaccine Coviran has showed 93.5% efficacy, bringing hope that the nation can be self-sufficient in its fight against COVID-19. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. And we begin in Venezuela, where the celebrations of the 200th anniversary of the Battle of Carabobo are underway. This was a confrontation that dealt the final blow to Spanish colonialism in Venezuelan land. The first official acts took place in the National Pantheon in Caracas, the site where the remains of Simón Bolívar, known as the Libertador or Liberator, rest. Authorities gathered to pay their respects to the main figures of the historic battle. Venezuela's independence was determined on June 24, 1821, after the Patriotic Army commanded by Simón Bolívar defeated the Spanish army led by Miguel de la Torre. The Royalists suffered 2,500 deaths, while the Patriot Army saw about 300 casualties. And as mentioned, on this day, 200 years ago, the Patriotic Army led by Simón Bolívar achieved the final victory against Spanish colonial forces in the Battle of Carabobo, thus sealing the independence of Venezuela. teleSUR correspondent Madeleine Garcia has been following some of the historical roots of the Venezuelan Liberation Army in its revolutionary struggle against Spain.
Venezuela gets ready to celebrate its bicentennial year of independence. Every corner in the Carabobo battlefield is full of stories that transcend the Venezuelan borders. This is how we remember them. On June 24, 1821, at 3 a.m., the day of the decisive battle for the independence of Venezuela began. At the time, Venezuela was part of the Viceroyalty of Colombia. This battle was the first step towards a great Latin American unity, the project of Venezuelan revolutionary Francisco de Miranda that Simón Bolívar sought to realize his entire life. After 10 years of bloody war, the longest in America, the one-time chance to end 300 years of Spanish domination had come up. The Battle of Carabobo was a moment within the liberation process sparked by the signing of an Act of Independence from Spain on July 5. It took Bolívar 10 years to cement that promise with 6,000 fighters as his flanks. The headquarters of the Spanish army, under the command of Captain General Miguel de la Torre, was located right here where I'm standing. And then, as a symbol of that victory, the Arch of Triumph was built in 1921. That day, the Royalist barracks burned in flames after the Patriotic Army arrived to this place after the 45-minute battle that took place in another part of the Carabobo savannah, very close to here. So you can feel the energy of that moment. When the 1st Division led by General José Antonio Páez arrived, who with his men blew the decisive stroke, that very day, at this time spot, Simón Bolívar rewarded Páez's bravery by promoting him to the rank of General-in-Chief. The Spanish army retreated then to the fortress of Puerto Cabello, which represented the last Spanish stronghold in Venezuela. Puerto Cabello was Venezuela's main port due to its location on the Caribbean coast. It was a strategic point for the Spanish, who had there all their arsenals and logistics. 200 years have passed since those events I'm referring to. It is easily said, but it cost Venezuela half its population. And today, Venezuela celebrates its freedom. is resilience in the face of new warfare and interference from modern empires, an economic blockage and illegal sanctions imposed by the United States to suffocate the population, using hardships as a weapon of war to put an end to the revolutionary Bolivarian projects initiated by Hugo Chávez Frías, who rescues the history and dignity of the people, a post taken from Chávez by President Nicolás Maduro. A story that 2 centuries ago was a focal point for independence struggles of other nations in the continent, and which repeats itself throughout the years. Behind me is the flame of the unknown soldier, the anonymous heroes like the rural workers and women who also took part in this heroic deed. I'm Madeline Garcia, reporting from the Carabobo field. I will keep on telling this story.
With 184 votes in favour, 2 against and 3 abstentions, Cuba obtained yet another diplomatic victory in the United Nations General Assembly against the criminal US blockade on Wednesday. As on the other 28 occasions, the United States and Israel voted against the lifting of the blockade, an illegal, unilateral and extraterritorial policy that violates the human rights of the Cuban people. The 3 abstentions corresponded to US allies Colombia, Brazil and Ukraine. Year after year, since 1992, the United Nations General Assembly has overwhelmingly backed the resolution against the sanctions that violate international law and prevent Cuba from developing on an equal basis with the rest of the world. Even in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, the sanctions were reinforced by the Trump administration, and the Biden administration has done nothing to change the situation. During his speech to present the resolution on the need to lift the US blockade before the UN General Assembly, Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez stressed the huge economic damages caused by the criminal policy.
Of the United States used the virus as an ally in its merciless, non-conventional war. It, in a deliberate and opportunistic fashion, ratcheted up the economic, commercial and financial blockade and caused the country to suffer losses standing at around $5 billion.
And as part of the UN debate preceding the vote on the resolution on Wednesday, several countries expressed their condemnation of the unilateral and extraterritorial US blockade. Ambassador of Venezuela to the United Nations, Samuel Moncada, expressed his country's solidarity with the Cuban government and people.
It's illegal because it violates all norms of international law. It is inhumane because it violates the human rights of an entire people. And worse still, it is criminal because it is a policy of calculated cruelty which seeks to produce pain and suffering among the civilian population. It is an attack which uses economic instruments. It is an act of collective punishment which, owing to its systematic and deliberate nature, constitutes a crime against humanity.
And Mexico's representative to the United Nations, Juan Ramón de la Fuente, stated that the lifting of the blockade could not be postponed, as the move would be of benefit for peace and stability in the Caribbean and Central American region.
In the face of a pandemic such as that of COVID-19, we cannot postpone the lifting of the blockade against Cuba. Mexico is convinced that lifting this blockade will contribute to not only reversing the difficult economic situation that the Cuban people finds itself in, but rather it will also improve the regional climate. And we urge the international community to demonstrate its solidarity and support.
Turning to Peru now, which is going through very tense developments as we speak. The illegal resignation of a member of the national electoral body is seen as a last-ditch attempt to twist the presidential vote results and prevent Pedro Castillo from taking office. The resignation of a National Electoral Board member while a process is in course is explicitly forbidden, but Luis Arce left the post, accusing the board of political bias. The move is widely seen as an attempt to discredit the body, which has rejected all unsubstantiated claims of fraud by Keiko Fujimori, the defeated extreme right presidential candidate. The board said it would ensure that the democratic process is respected, which should mean the imminent declaration of progressive candidate Pedro Castillo as president-elect. Meanwhile, several social organisations, political parties, student groups, among others, have called for demonstrations and announced a national civic and popular strike if the official proclamation of Castillo does not take place before July 6. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. On Thursday, Russia again warned Western powers that trespassing its territorial waters will have consequences after a British war vessel incursioned into Russian jurisdiction near Crimea this week. With warning fire, Russian Navy ships and aircraft expelled the vessel, the HMS Defender, into international waters in the Black Sea, the Russian government said. The Russian authorities described the United Kingdom's act as a provocation and a violation of international law. London has argued that its vessel was navigating Ukrainian waters, as the UK does not recognise Crimea as Russian. In turn, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said the UK might consider rebaptising the Defender as HMS Aggressor instead. The European Council meeting held Thursday in Brussels had Russia among its hot topics. French and German initiative proposed a summit between Russia and the European countries in which the leaders from both sides would meet face-to-face and discuss topics with intent of compromising. Despite this possible diplomatic alternative, Europe threatened to apply more economic sanctions against Russia if they consider Moscow to be interfering in Western interests. In Canada, new evidence of genocide has come up. Hundreds of unmarked graves were discovered at the site of another former residential school for Indigenous children, the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations said. The graves are located at the old residential Indigenous school of Marieville, southwest of the Saskatchewan province in south-central Canada. Indigenous children were forced to attend these special schools, most of them run by churches. The idea was to brainwash children into assimilation to the Anglo-Saxon culture of their colonizers. But evidence seems to show now that genocide was also part of the plan. On June 1st, the remains of 215 Indigenous children were found at another school, prompting statements of sorrow and consternation. The remains in the new finding more than triple those of June 1st, the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations reported. Former antivirus magnate John McAfee was found dead in his prison cell in Barcelona just hours after a Spanish court approved his extradition to the United States. In a statement, the Spanish Ministry of Justice said guards and prison medical staff intervened and attempted resuscitation to no avail. The ministry added investigators were to be dispatched to probe the cause of death, but everything indicates it could be a suicide. McAfee was arrested in Spain in October 2020 and held in jail as a flight risk pending his extradition hearing. The Constitution and Justice Committee of Brazil's Chamber of Deputies this Wednesday approved a bill that threatens the future of indigenous lands as well as the environment. With 40 votes in favour and 21 against, Bill 490 was passed, which eliminates the demarcation of indigenous lands, exposing them to private interests for farming, mining and deforestation. It will now go to a vote by the entire Chamber of Deputies. During the debate, the country's first indigenous federal deputy, Chicas Joenia, was prevented several times from completing her statements. Some 800 indigenous people remain camped out in Brasilia, protesting against the bill. Members of the movement, Rise Up for the Earth, denounced being violently repressed by the security forces, including with the use of tear gas. In an exclusive interview for teleSUR, the former president of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula Silva, stresses concerns regarding COVID-19 and its impact on the Brazilian population. While noting that this is his main priority at the moment, he also acknowledged that there is growing support for him to stand in the next presidential elections, although his decision is not yet made.
I thought about being a candidate in 2018. The justice system did not allow me to, because they fabricated a legal force to take me out of the electoral race, and now, in 2022, many people, especially my party, want me to be a candidate, and I think I will decide by the end of the year, because what I want to discuss now is the issue of vaccination. We are in a movement to guarantee vaccines for the entire Brazilian population, to guarantee an emergency income for all the victims of COVID-19, for all those who are unemployed, and we are also trying to ensure a credit guarantee so that people can advance economically. That is a priority in 2021. At the right time, I will decide whether I will be a candidate or not. Now, all the polls show that I can win the elections in 2022, and that I am in first place, and that I have a good chance of defeating Bolsonaro. But the Brazilian political picture is not yet defined, because I do not know how many candidates are going to run, or how many candidates of the left. I will decide when the time comes.
Lula also said that his efforts have always been aimed at guaranteeing the quality of life of the Brazilian people, and that this struggle will continue.
Someone, a man, has a cause. There is no struggle that he can't wage. My cause is to give Brazil back to its sovereignty, to give back the possibility to improve living standards, to ensure food, health, culture, education, because I did it while I was a president. I am sure that this struggle to restore Brazil for Brazilians and to ensure that Brazil has a sovereign policy and to make it a strong state, to improve the living standards of our people, to help them to improve their destiny so that our country can be developed. This struggle motivates me and means I am capable of facing any candidate of the right or far right.
The former Brazilian president also expressed his conviction that it is possible to build a more united Latin America with fair conditions for each and every one of the peoples of the region.
This, as I believe in God, that it is possible to build a great economic bloc in Latin America and South America to challenge the economic bloc represented by the United States and Canada, the European economic bloc, and the Chinese economic bloc, because we can do it. All countries can grow and develop and become international protagonists. That is why I am willing, when the time comes for me to announce my candidacy, and as I can say that we will win the elections in Brazil, because Brazil has to become a leading country in South America once again. And we must try to strengthen Mercosur, UNASUR, and CELAC. We must try to strengthen relations with the African continent, with BRICS, and re-establish Brazil's tradition of not having disputes in the world. We have always coexisted well with all the countries of the world. We must treat Uruguay as we treat the United States. We must treat Bolivia as we treat China, with respect, without speaking badly to the small guys and, well, to the bigger ones. We must speak on equal terms in the name of the sovereignty of each country in Latin America.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The Iranian-developed vaccine Coviran has showed 93.5% efficacy against the novel coronavirus, project scientists reported. The head of the coronavirus vaccine development project, Hassan Jalili, reported that second phase trials proved that in the ages between 18 and 57, the vaccine was able to neutralize the virus up to 93.5%. The Coviran vaccine will soon be supplied to the entire country, thus achieving self-sufficiency in this regard. United States-led sanctions against Iran have severely affected the country's capacity to fight the pandemic. So far, 12 nations have requested to import the Coviran Barakat COVID-19 vaccine, the official said. Only 1% of the African population has been vaccinated against the pandemic. While developed countries in the Western Hemisphere distribute the anti-COVID vaccines for a gross profit, the African world faces its third peak of the disease in uncontrollable waves. This was addressed by the director of the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, John Nkengasong.
It's extremely brutal, and we hope that countries will take drastic measures. We are running a race behind time here because the pandemic is ahead of us. Let me put it very bluntly. We are not winning in Africa. We are not winning in Africa this battle against the virus. So it really doesn't matter to me at this point whether the vaccines are from COVAX or from anything. What we need is rapid access to vaccines to member states.
Venezuela this Thursday received the first batch of the Abdala COVID-19 vaccine developed in Cuba. Vice President Delcy Rodriguez received the shipment, which is part of the contract signed between Venezuela and Cuba for the development of 12 million doses of the Abdala vaccine against the coronavirus. This comes after the scientific community confirmed the vaccine candidate had shown efficacy of more than 92%. Cuban ambassador to Venezuela, Dagoberto Rodriguez, stressed that the agreement is a sign of the close relations and solidarity between the two countries. As the far-right government of Jair Bolsonaro continues to face a Senate investigation into its mishandling of the health crisis, Brazil registered a record number of COVID-19 cases on Wednesday. The health ministry's figures confirm the arrival of a third wave of the pandemic in the world's second deadliest country. Over 115,000 new cases were confirmed on Wednesday, as well as almost 2,400 COVID-19 related fatalities. Meanwhile, the Copa America football tournament continues as a means of distraction for the masses, although it too has not escaped the virus. The vaccination program continues to be slow, and the population is mobilizing to demand both vaccines and financial support in the midst of the ongoing economic crisis. The new Israeli government approved another set of illegal construction projects in the occupied West Bank, keeping policies from the previous cabinet. The Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett signed the go-ahead to 31 construction projects in the illegal settlements, including a mall, a network of infrastructure and modifications of the urban grid in the occupied Palestinian territory of the West Bank. And we've come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also follow us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. Plus you can catch up on our shows on our YouTube channel. For TeleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.